Welcome to Lesson 1.4 of the Grant Architect course. In this lesson, we will explore state and local government funding, an often underutilized source of grant support that can be more accessible than direct federal funding for many organizations. State agencies, county governments, and municipal bodies distribute billions of dollars annually through their own programs and through pass-through funding from federal sources. Understanding how these funding streams work, how they differ from direct federal funding, and how to navigate the unique requirements of state and local funders is essential for a comprehensive grant strategy. By the end of this lesson, you will understand the landscape of state and local funding and how to position your organization to access these resources. The state and local funding landscape includes several distinct funding streams that you should understand. Pass-through funding represents federal dollars that flow through state agencies to local organizations. Rather than applying directly to the federal government, you apply to your state agency, which administers the federal program. Examples include many workforce development programs, community development block grants, and certain health and human services programs. State-originated funding comes from programs funded by state tax revenues rather than federal sources. These programs reflect state-level priorities and may have different requirements than federal programs. Every state has its own portfolio of grant programs supporting various sectors. County and municipal grants come from local government entities. Cities and counties may have their own grant programs, often focused on local priorities like community development, public safety, arts and culture, or economic development. These grants are typically smaller but may have less competition. Special districts are regional authorities with dedicated funding streams. These might include transit authorities, water districts, park districts, or other special purpose government entities that have grant programs related to their missions. Pass-through funding deserves special attention because it represents a significant opportunity for many organizations. Pass-through funding occurs when federal dollars are allocated to state or local government agencies, which then distribute those funds to subrecipients through competitive grant processes or formula allocations. Common examples include community development block grants administered by state housing agencies, workforce development programs administered by state labor departments, maternal and child health programs administered by state health departments, and education programs administered by state education agencies. An advantage of pass-through funding is that competition may be less intense than for direct federal applications. Instead of competing nationally, you are competing within your state or region. State agencies may also be more accessible than federal program officers, making it easier to build relationships and get guidance. However, pass-through funding can be complex because you may be subject to both federal requirements and additional state requirements. The state agency may impose its own rules on top of federal regulations. Understanding both layers of requirements is essential for compliance. Finding state funding opportunities requires knowing where to look within your state's government structure. Many states have centralized grant portals similar to grants.gov at the federal level. These portals aggregate opportunities from multiple state agencies in one searchable location. Search for your state's name plus grant portal or grant opportunities to find if your state has such a system. Individual state agency websites are essential resources. Departments of health, education, social services, housing, environmental protection, and other agencies post opportunities on their own websites. Identify the agencies relevant to your work and monitor their funding pages regularly. State registers, sometimes called administrative registers or bulletins, are official publications where state governments post notices, including funding opportunities. These are analogous to the Federal Register at the state level. Networking with state agency staff can be valuable for learning about upcoming opportunities before they are publicly announced, understanding agency priorities, and getting guidance on how to strengthen applications. State agency staff are often more accessible than their federal counterparts, and building these relationships can give you an advantage. State funding has distinct characteristics that differentiate it from federal funding. The level of formality varies significantly across states and programs. Some state grant programs mirror federal processes with detailed applications, structured review panels, and rigorous compliance requirements. Others are more flexible and informal, with simpler applications and more discretionary decision making. Political sensitivity is more pronounced at the state level. State priorities can shift significantly with elections and changes in administration. Programs that are well funded under one governor may be reduced or eliminated under the next. This political volatility creates both opportunities and risks. Budget dependence means funding levels are tied to state budget cycles and fiscal conditions. When states face budget shortfalls, grant programs are often reduced. When revenues are strong, new opportunities may emerge. Monitoring your state's fiscal situation helps you anticipate funding trends. Relationships often matter more at the state level than at the federal level. State government is smaller and more personal. Program officers may have more discretion. Building genuine relationships with state agency staff can provide valuable advantages in understanding opportunities and navigating processes. County and municipal funding represents the most local level of government grant funding. Cities, counties, and other local government entities often have grant programs that can be valuable components of your overall funding strategy. Community focus characterizes local funding. Grants typically target local priorities and local constituents. A city arts grant will focus on local artists and local audiences. A county health grant will focus on county residents. This local focus can be advantageous if your work is community-based. Accessibility is often greater than for state or federal funding. Local government offices are nearby, program staff are more accessible, application processes may be simpler. For organizations new to grants or with limited capacity, local funding can be a good starting point. Scale is typically smaller. Local grants might be $5,000 or $25,000 rather than hundreds of thousands. But competition may also be less intense, and smaller grants can still make meaningful contributions to your work. Political dynamics at the local level can heavily influence funding decisions. City council members and county commissioners may have significant influence over which organizations receive funding. Understanding local political relationships is important. Block grants are a specific type of federal funding that gives states significant flexibility in how funds are used. Understanding block grants helps you navigate state-administered federal programs. Block grants provide federal funds to states for broad purposes, with states having discretion to allocate those funds among various uses and recipients within federal parameters. This contrasts with categorical grants, where the federal government specifies exactly how funds must be used. Key examples include the Community Development Block Grant, which supports community development activities, the Social Services Block Grant, which supports a wide range of social services, and the Maternal and Child Health Block Grant, which supports health services for mothers and children. Because states have discretion in allocating block grant funds, the priorities and opportunities vary by state. Your state may emphasize certain uses over others based on state-level priorities, political considerations, and perceived needs. Understanding how your state chooses to use its block grant allocations helps you identify opportunities. Block grants can create opportunities that align with state-specific priorities. If your state has chosen to emphasize a particular issue area, related organizations may have better funding prospects than in states with different priorities. Compliance considerations for state and local funding can be complex because you may face multiple layers of requirements. Layered requirements occur when you receive pass-through funding. You must comply with the underlying federal requirements plus any additional requirements your state agency imposes. The state may have its own procurement rules, reporting formats, or administrative requirements that go beyond federal minimums. State-specific rules vary considerably. Some states have requirements that are more stringent than federal rules in certain areas. Others may have additional categories of unallowable costs or different prior approval thresholds. You must understand both layers of requirements for the specific funding you receive. Documentation requirements may differ from federal norms. State agencies may require different forms, different reporting formats, or different supporting documentation than you would provide for a direct federal grant. Adapting your systems to meet state-specific documentation requirements may be necessary. Audit implications include the possibility of state audits in addition to federal audit requirements. State auditors may review your use of state-administered funds. The audit criteria and processes may differ somewhat from federal audits. Understanding what auditors will examine helps you maintain appropriate records. Building relationships with state agency staff can significantly enhance your success with state funding. State agencies often offer workshops, training sessions, and information sessions about their programs. Attending these events demonstrates your interest and gives you opportunities to meet staff, learn about priorities, and ask questions. Make a habit of attending relevant sessions even when you are not actively applying. Meeting program staff before you apply can be valuable. Introduce yourself and your organization. Learn about the program officer's priorities and concerns. Ask for guidance on how to submit strong applications. These conversations can provide insights that improve your competitiveness. Providing input on state policies and programs positions you as a thoughtful stakeholder. When state agencies solicit public comment on program designs or priorities, participate constructively. Your input may influence program direction, and your engagement demonstrates your commitment to the field. Being a resource to state agency staff builds goodwill. Share relevant research, invite them to events, or connect them with other stakeholders. When you are seen as someone who adds value beyond just seeking funding, you build a stronger relationship. Strategies for building relationships with local government differ somewhat from state-level strategies because of the more personal nature of local government. Engaging elected officials is important because city council members, county commissioners, and other local elected officials often have direct influence over funding decisions. Know your local elected officials, invite them to your events, keep them informed about your work. When they understand and value what you do, they may advocate for funding your organization. Attending public meetings increases your visibility in local government. City council meetings, county commission meetings, and committee meetings are public and open to attendance. Being seen as an engaged community stakeholder builds credibility. Collaborating with local government staff on issues of mutual interest builds relationships. Department heads and program managers may appreciate organizations that bring resources, expertise, or partnership opportunities. Look for ways to be a valuable partner beyond just seeking funding. Community presence matters at the local level. Organizations that are visible and active in community affairs, that show up at local events and participate in community initiatives build the kind of reputation that translates into funding support. Strategic considerations help you approach state and local funding effectively. Geographic alignment is fundamental. Focus your efforts on funders in your service area. A county grant program in another county will not fund your work. Understand the geographic scope of potential funders and ensure alignment with where you work. Timing awareness helps you plan your pursuit of state and local funding. Understand budget cycles. When does the state legislature set the budget? When does the city council adopt its budget? Political calendars also matter. Are there upcoming elections that might change priorities? Timing your applications appropriately increases your chances. Complementary funding strategies use local funding to complement larger grants. A small city grant might provide matching funds for a larger state or federal application. Building a portfolio of funding from multiple government levels can strengthen your overall position. Capacity building suggests a progression from local to larger funding sources. For organizations new to government grants, starting with local funding allows you to build experience and track record with less complexity and competition. Success with local grants demonstrates your ability to manage government funding, positioning you for larger state and federal grants later. State and local funding presents challenges that you should consider realistically. Variability across jurisdictions makes it difficult to develop standardized approaches. What works in one state may not work in another. What one city prioritizes, a neighboring city may not fund at all. If you work across multiple jurisdictions, you must learn each one's unique requirements and priorities. Instability is a concern because state and local funding is subject to budget pressures and political changes. Economic downturns can lead to sudden cuts. New elected officials may shift priorities. Programs can be eliminated with little notice. Relying too heavily on any single state or local funding source creates vulnerability. Complexity arises from navigating multiple layers of government, each with its own rules, cultures, and relationships. Managing relationships with federal, state, county, and municipal funders simultaneously can strain organizational capacity. Scale limitations mean individual grants may be too small to support major projects. While local grants can be valuable, they may not provide the resources needed for substantial initiatives. You may need to combine multiple small grants, which creates its own administrative burden. Several special funding mechanisms exist at state and local levels that you should understand. Earmarks are funds that legislators direct to specific recipients or projects. While controversial, earmarks exist at both federal and state levels. Understanding how earmarks work in your jurisdiction and whether your elected representatives support them can reveal funding opportunities, though pursuing earmarks requires careful attention to ethical considerations we will discuss later. Set-asides reserve portions of larger programs for specific populations or organization types. A state program might set aside a percentage of funds for rural organizations or for organizations led by members of specific communities. Knowing about set-asides that apply to your organization can improve your competitive position. Formula grants allocate funds based on population, poverty levels, or other metrics rather than competitive application. Your organization might receive formula funding automatically if you meet certain criteria, or formula allocations to your area might create opportunities for competitive sub-grants. Cooperative agreements involve more intensive government involvement in the project than traditional grants. The government agency may be an active partner in implementation rather than simply providing and monitoring funds. These arrangements are common for certain types of projects. Building a multi-level strategy that incorporates federal, state, and local funding creates a stronger and more sustainable funding base. A portfolio approach means pursuing funding from multiple government levels rather than focusing exclusively on one level. Federal grants provide scale and stability. State grants may offer better fit with regional priorities. Local grants provide community connection and matching funds. Together, they create a diversified funding portfolio. Diversification reduces risk. If federal priorities shift, your state funding continues. If a city council member who supported you loses an election, you have other funding sources. Avoid becoming over-reliant on any single government funder at any level. Alignment requires careful attention when you receive funding from multiple government sources for related work. Your activities must meet the requirements of all funders. This can create complexity if funders have different expectations, but careful program design can satisfy multiple funders with coordinated activities. Efficiency comes from developing systems that work across multiple grants. Standardized time tracking systems, documentation protocols, and reporting templates can reduce administrative burden when managing grants from multiple government sources. Invest in systems that scale. Let us summarize what we have covered in this lesson on state and local funding. The landscape includes multiple funding streams, pass-through funding from federal sources, state-originated funding from state tax revenues, and county and municipal funding from local governments. Each stream has distinct characteristics and opportunities. Key characteristics include variable levels of formality across programs and jurisdictions, political sensitivity to elections and budget conditions, and the importance of relationships with government staff and officials. Understanding these characteristics helps you navigate state and local funding effectively. Strategic approaches include building relationships with agency staff and elected officials, understanding the layered requirements of pass-through funding, and diversifying your government funding across multiple levels to reduce risk and increase stability. In our next lesson, we will shift from government funders to explore private foundations. We will examine the different types of foundations, understand foundation culture and decision-making, and learn how to research and approach foundation funders effectively. Private foundations operate differently from government funders, and understanding these differences is essential for a comprehensive grant strategy.